All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're unpacking some fascinating source analysis today that breaks down exactly why a recent Egyptian military maneuver has Israeli authorities on absolute high alert. Now, if you follow regional geopolitics, you know military exercises. They happen all the time. But the source material we're looking at highlights one specific maneuver, dubbed Badr 26, and it triggered a completely different level of reaction. We're going to look directly at the historical and strategic data to figure out exactly why.
To understand the panic happening right now, our source actually takes us back to the past, specifically to this pretty chilling quote. According to the analysis, these were the desperate radio calls from Israeli soldiers back to their command during the 1973 October War. And wow, this single line? It perfectly captures the terrifying effectiveness of what was, back then, Egypt's brand new electronic warfare capability. It wasn't just about overwhelming firepower, you see. It was literally about blinding the opponent.
So, that brings us to a massive question posed by our source material regarding a live-fire exercise from 2026. Why does the simple name Badr carry such heavy, intense historical weight for Israeli authorities today? Well, the source argues that to truly understand the sheer panic surrounding this 2026 drill, which, by the way, took place incredibly close to the Israeli border, we really have to decode the legacy behind that specific name.
Because the sheer scale of the Badr 26 maneuver is frankly what makes it so alarming. The analysis points out that this wasn't your standard run-of-the-mill drill out in the deep desert. No. Badr 26 was executed just 100 meters from the Israeli border, and they were using live ammunition. But the absolute most alarming detail here, the immediate severing of communications and electronic jamming in nearby Israeli settlements. The source notes this caused instant panic in the Knesset, completely hijacking media attention away from other regional conflicts and aiming it straight at the Egyptian border.
Now, to wrap our heads around this modern fear of Egyptian electronic interference, the analysis contrasts the technological landscape way back in 1967. And guys, the gap was massive. It was like night and day. On one side, you had Egypt relying on super rudimentary wireless reconnaissance. We're talking essentially a soldier with headphones, a notebook, and a pen just listening for any static across the canal. On the flip side, Israel possessed highly advanced US-supplied radar deception and jamming tech, stuff that could literally create phantom targets on Egyptian screens.
So how on earth did they close that massive gap? Well, facing a strict Soviet refusal to hand over any advanced tech, the source explains how Egypt decided to just build its own electronic warfare, or EW, formations entirely from scratch. They started with a basic wireless interference battalion in 1964, and by 1970, they officially established formal EW formations. And a really key component here, according to the source, was the rigorous officer training. They forced operators to completely master Hebrew, English, Arabic, and Morse code. Why? So they could seamlessly intercept and translate enemy comms on the fly. And because they didn't have high-tech spy planes, the source details how Egypt used geography and some seriously clever disguises as these incredibly effective workarounds. For instance, down in the Gulf of Aqaba, they used simple fishing boats, just loaded up with hidden EW gear. Up in the Mediterranean, they deployed these massive foreign-flagged merchant ships. On deck, they looked like they were carrying regular cargo, but the holes were just packed full of jamming and listening devices, secretly mapping Israeli positions all along the coast. Talk about hiding in plain sight.
Okay, let's jump forward to 1973 and see how all this historical buildup led to a massive battlefield surprise. The source highlights one very specific event on October 8th, the absolutely shocking ambush involving Colonel Assaf Yagouri. He was a highly regarded commander of the 190th Armored Brigade. The Israeli military sent him in to eliminate Egyptian bridgeheads, and they were fully expecting a totally standard engagement. But according to the source, the execution of this trap was tense and incredibly disciplined. It played out like this. First, Egyptian EW operators intercepted communications, detecting Yagouri's 100 approaching tanks. Next, the Egyptian commander ordered absolute dead silence. No one fires until those tanks are lured within a mere 3 kilometers. Then, the trap sprang. Egyptian EW completely severed the Israeli communications. Without any way to coordinate, the Israeli tanks basically scattered, and a devastating ambush was launched, directly resulting in Yagouri's capture.
According to the analysis, this capture was nothing short of a psychological earthquake.
After spending 46 days as a prisoner of war and eventually being released, the source notes that Yagouri actually wrote an article for the Israeli newspaper Maariv. He expressed absolute shock at their easy defeat. He was asking how this could possibly happen to their quote-unquote invincible army. And he even went as far as accusing the Israeli military of hiding the true devastating extent of their losses from the general public.
But the source claims an even bigger shock came just a few days later, because if capturing a brigade commander was bad, the elimination of General Abraham Mandler was flat-out catastrophic. Mandler wasn't just anyone. He was the commander of the armored forces and a leading candidate to become the very next Israeli chief of staff.
So the really crucial point here is how they found him. The source attributes this entirely to a mix of Israeli overconfidence and Egyptian EW efficiency. Get this, from October 9th to the 11th, Israeli forces were literally communicating unencrypted on the radio. First, they mentioned an important person, then the big boss, and incredibly, they eventually just started saying his actual name. They totally assumed the Egyptians couldn't hear or understand them. Big mistake. By October 13th, Egyptian EW had pinpointed his fatal meeting at the GD Pass, and they called in a hyper-precise artillery strike.
And the operation didn't even end with that strike. According to the analysis, Egyptian forces did not stop there. When the Israeli command frantically sent in a rescue helicopter, Egyptian EW units instantly jammed its communications. This total disorientation allowed Egyptian anti-aircraft units to easily shoot down the chopper, which was then followed by ground troops moving in and capturing the surviving Israeli medical team. The source points to this exact moment as the point when Israel realized the terrifying, real-world proficiency of Egypt's homegrown electronic warfare.
But there's one number from that exact same day that really puts everything into perspective, and that is 25 kilometers. See, an American SR-71 spy plane flew over the canal at a staggering altitude of 25 kilometers, moving at 3 times the speed of sound. The source points out that Egyptian air defenses couldn't even touch it. Their Soviet-supplied missiles simply couldn't reach that high, so all their positions were photographed and handed right over to Israel.
So why does the source even include this detail about the spy plane? Because it perfectly illustrates a hard-learned lesson in self-reliance. The analysis argues this specific event proved once and for all that Egypt couldn't rely on weapons provided by the Soviet Union, who were actively withholding their top-tier technology. And that made their localized, completely self-developed electronic warfare victories, like those ambushes of Yagouri and Mandler, even more absolutely critical to their overall success in the war.
So how does all of this intense history tie back to what's happening today? Well, the source maps out the evolution of the Badr name to show exactly why it's such a trigger word. The original Operation Badr in 1973? That was the legendary canal crossing. Then came Badr in 96, a massive drill simulating defense against weapons of mass destruction. And now, Badr 26, the live-fire exercise just 100 meters from the border. You see, the name isn't an accident. It is a very deliberate historical echo.
Looking closely at that Badr 96 maneuver under President Mubarak, the analysis highlights some genuinely staggering logistical achievements that really rattled observers back then. For starters, it was the largest maneuver in their entire history up to that point. They somehow managed to move 60% of their military gear into the Sinai Peninsula in under 6 hours. But most impressively, they achieved a maximum alert status in just 11 minutes. I mean, talk about a massive flex of logistical muscle.
Finally, bringing it back to the present, the source asserts that the recent Badr 26 maneuver wasn't just out of the blue. The analysis argues it was actually a direct, completely unapologetic response to Israel's recent military actions in the Philadelphia corridor during the Gaza conflict. According to the source material, Egypt viewed this as a stark infringement of their peace treaty. It effectively neutralized prior treaty restraints, prompting this massive, incredibly close live-fire show of force. Basically a way to say, loud and clear, we are ready.
Which leaves us with a final, highly provocative question drawn straight from the implications of our source material. If electronic warfare capabilities have evolved this drastically since 1973, and if historical treaties are now so visibly strained, what exactly will the next Badr maneuver look like? It is a deeply complex, highly volatile situation, and understanding the history of these capabilities is absolutely crucial if you want to properly read the headlines today. That's all for this explainer. Keep analyzing, and as always, keep asking questions.